Namaskar. Welcome to this session. Uh, Today we will commence with a perspective which I said at the end of the last session, the God being redefined. Today we are in a scientific era, and we want everything, every aspect of knowledge to come through a scientific process. The scientific process defining is axiomatic. To define, one needs to address the certain dimensions of a thing, perspectives of a thing, such as Swarupa, that is essential nature. Then Lakshana, that is attributes and characteristics. Then Moola, Moola means the source. And then Karana, the cause. The Hetu, the purpose. The Karya, the function. And Avastha, the state. So in scientific process of inquiry, these are important aspects to be considered. Thus the inquiry is complete and comprehensive. And this process of inquiry has been carried out in Hindu philosophies or by Hindu philosophers by arriving at what they called as dharma, that is characteristics. The dharmi, they characterized. Lakshana, that is attribute. The karya, the role, function, and effect. Then karana, that is cause. Avishkara, that is manifestation. Hetu, that is purpose. Ashraya, that is support, substrate. And ashrita, the supported. So in Indian philosophical systems, the inquiries were similarly taking place with certain additional factors. The scientific mind in the pursuit of an inquiry or knowledge process counts on sensation, empirical observation, empirical processes, intellectual and logical processes, analytical processes, scientific processes, epistemological processes. Now, when it comes to studying matters, which includes even psychic aspects, there are emotional and sentimental considerations. Now, these are psychic and samskarika considerations. However, when it comes to inquiry into God, divinity, the Almighty, the above processes are incompatible and out of place. The divinity is a metaphysical entity. Thus, science, with its present paradigms and scientific processes, can never ever get to divinity, because they want everything in test tube. Now, they cannot be getting divinity into test tube. A scientific or a scientist, perhaps, a scientist according to Indian metaphysicist is Jadavadi. What we have scientists today, scientist clan, according to philosophers, they are Jadavadis, meaning materialists. All scientists are materialists. They deal with materials, they deal with matters. The science deals with phenomenal reality, and divinity is a nominal entity. Divinity or God, not an objective entity, and thus can only be dealt with by metaphysicists. Scientists should not dabble with these inquiries unless they change their paradigms. With today's paradigms, with present paradigms, because they have to deal with materials, and therefore that paradigm is not suitable, and therefore they really don't have authority to be dabbling with metaphysical entities such as God or divinity. This entity is not an object that science can investigate, inquire, or study. The God is divinity and it is metaphysical entity. It is nominal entity, not manifest. It is unmanifest entity. And that is the most important thing. It is unmanifest. Science can deal with something that is manifest and not something that is unmanifest. Its paradigm is meant to inquire into manifest things. And utmost important is that it is a knower entity rather than knowable entity. So, the divinity is a subjective entity, knower entity, and not a knowable entity, and science deals with all knowables. The scientists deal with knowables and not with knower. This must be understood. While the divinity that we are discussing is a knower entity, when even layman in dharma and religion says that he is omniscient. He is omniscient means he is a knower. So it will be futile for modern man to await the scientific statement or scientist statement on God or divinity. The principles of dharma, atma, Ishvara, God, divinity are beyond the scope of science and scientific processes. No scientist will ever come close to defining metaphysical entity. That's why it is called metaphysics. It would be inadvisable, or for scientists to dabble with this divinity, concept of dharma, concept of atma. Unfortunately, the modern world or the celebrities of the modern world in every field are venturing to pass judgment on such metaphysical mysterious aspects because they are held authority just by being celebrities in various fields. An essential characteristic of the scientific process involves inquiring into knowable and knowing categories, but not the knower category. The quest to know the knower is unique process of inquiry and is only possible by very deep subjective introspection called antarmukhi. It is infacedness and inwardliness of the mind. One needs to go inwardly in discovery of Dharma Tattva, in discovery of Atma Tattva, in discovery of Ishvara Tattva. So it needs Antarmukhi, and that Antarmukhi is in yoga and is in Adhyatmic processes. So that is the subjective inwardliness and infacedness. It's a unique aspect of yogic process. So it should be left to yoga to really deal with Dharma Tattva, Atma Tattva, and Ishvara Tattva. At this stage, we shall embrace the investigation process which is acceptable to an astika, theistically inclined, before satisfying the doubting mind of atheists. So let us not confront the atheists and try to prove this entity, the God, entity of divinity. But let us encounter the theists who are astikas, who are having some amount of confusion, lack of clarity. So we will be answering them and not answering the atheists, and even not those who are skeptics or those who are agnostics. Those who believe, they are not clear, they don't have clarity, and many times they lose battles with atheists and skeptics and agnostics because of their intellectual prowess. They easily vanquish these theistic people, astika people. So we will be having these people as audience, and we will not be trying to put our arguments for atheists and skeptics and agnostics. We must try to protect those who believe in God, those who believe in divinity. So first of all, we'll have to provide something for them to put their argumentations. If there are counter argumentations by atheists and skeptics and the agnostics. So that's what we are going to do now. We will not be taking these opponents, atheists, and prove the God for them, or those who don't believe try to prove them. We are not going to have an encounter with them. We will not be even considering the profane. We don't have to even consider the profane and try to convince a profane. Now, this will actually and precisely will be beginning by considering the knowledge process, because we need to give some knowledge to these astikas, the atheists, so that they are not vulnerable when they are encountered or they are encountering by atheists, skeptics, and agnostic people or profane people. So let's try to take a overview of knowledge process here, because we have to give them this knowledge that if they believe in God, they have some something to substantiate their stand, and not say that I have heard about this or I am under this influence. I just believe in God. I can't answer you. That's what they say to a profane or to an atheist. So therefore, some knowledge process which will reinforce the belief of astikas, the belief of the believers in this entity which is divinity and God. Because we cannot be waiting for science to come and prove the God. So, now how can we get knowledge in any realm? How do we get knowledge in any realm or every realm, including that of Atma, Paramatma, Ishvara, etc.? It is by a cognitive process. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama. So these are the pramanas which we have considered in earlier part of our studies. Now this Pratyaksha is direct perception, Anumana is inference, and we have seen that how through inference divinity was postulated and proved, and arguments were placed in front of those who were atheists, non-believers, or profanes, or heterodox in their approach. Now these are the means of knowledge which we have considered earlier. The Agama Pramana is also called Shabda Pramana, Shastra Pramana. So that's how the knowledge comes. Pratyaksha is a direct perception. It is for grasping the gross, visible, knowable, and the objects which are sensory objects. Therefore, it will be of the form of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So the science deals with that which has these forms: Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So that the senses can come in, empirical process can come in, psychosensory process can come in, and therefore the empirical intelligence can work. And then it will work in a scientific process and try to provide valid knowledge. And Anumana, we know how much it depends upon Pratyaksha. So the divinity was proved by Anumana Pramana by Udayanacharya, which we saw in one of the sessions, previous sessions on Ishvara. Now the third means of knowledge is so important, and this is the means of knowledge which Astikas believe. Astikas have given validity to it. Now that is Shastra Pramana, or that is Agama Pramana. That is testimony, Shabda, or Veda, Veda Shastra, Shruti, Smriti, Arsha Vignan, Rishi Vignan, Agama. The Vedas are source of eternal knowledge called Nigama. So for Astikas, Vedas are source of knowledge. Agama etymologically means the knowledge of the source which comes down to us through generations and generations and generations, and so that it becomes comprehensible to our intelligence. So Agama will be giving you illustrations or examples or analogies whereby your intelligence can have some comprehension of it. So the Agamas have done this, that the knowledge of the source has been disseminated in various generations to people by way of the Gospels of saints and sages, and that's how the Agama works. So there are Agamas such as Shaiva Agama, Vaishnava Agama, Shakta Agama. Agama Pramana or Shastra Pramana imply validity of Veda Vedanta Veda Shastras, Vedanta Shastras, Agamas, Itihasa Purana, Veda Vedangas, Upavedangas, the Gospels of sages, saints, and wise men. So this is a wide body, huge body of agamas. So these are the means of knowledge through which we can really know the God. What I am trying to say that is that the God is not something that one should be believing in it. Because it would be quite fragile. Belief is quite fragile. It must be reinforced and backed by some knowledge, by certain precepts, by certain postulations given by the rishis, munis, yogis, saints, sages, etc. So then the belief becomes more reinforced, and the belief also becomes more discerning. It won't just remain as belief merely, but it will become more discerning. So, Astikas have testimonies such as Agama, Aptavachana, that means speech of trustworthy people, authoritative people, and trustworthy people. And they are reliable people. What they say, those are all reliable things, trustworthy things, dependable things. So such are the resources. And we have enormous such resources available. We don't have to just blindly believe in God if we are astikas. We can reinforce the belief with the buddhi, with some reasoning and logic, etc., which is in the realm of metaphysics. So the divinity or God has to be postulated, defined, described, characterized for benefit of astikas. So these sacred texts provide instructions for various worship forms and defining, describing, articulating, enumerating divinity itself. Even other principles such as Atma and Dharma. So, that's why, because as I said, divinity is such a thing, it is not just to be believed in. It is such principle that it should be worshipped. Just believing in God is not sufficient, and if you believe in God, if you do not take recourse to any worship form, your belief is not sufficient. Just believing is not sufficient. So that should be reinforced. It must definitely end in some worship form or some upasana form. And if you recall, we saw those various upasana forms such as Vyakta, Murta, Vyakta, Avyakta, Murta, Amurta, Saguna, Nirguna, Savishesha, Nirvishesha. So there are emotional worship forms, or there are ritualistic worship forms which are given by our tradition. Long tradition of Rishi Munis, which has originated in Rishis and Munis. Agamas have specified those. Agamas have also temple architecture, somewhere which they can create a place of worship in case that is needed, because temples are not actually place of worship. The temples are energy centers. They receive the energies, celestial energies and universal energy. So the shrines are able to take the energies from cosmos, and therefore when we enter the shrine, those energies also influence us, we also receive those energies. So, because the worship form for Hindus, worshipping is at home. There is a concept called puja room. If there has to be worship that can be done very well at home itself. So there is an arrangement and there is a cultural provision that you can be having your worship carried out at home. You don't have to go to temples necessarily. But the temples primarily are there because they are energy receivers from cosmos. And then they store the energy there. And the shrines are also storing the energy because for ages, for centuries and millennia, the noble people have walked into shrines, and therefore they are charged with energies such as Gnaneshwars, Tukarams, Tyagraj, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or Prahlada, Narada, Parashara, Pundarika, Vyasa, Ambarisha, Shuka, Shaunaka. So all these noble sages have charged the temple by their presence, by their visits, and we can get those energies back. We can receive those energies. That is why temples are energy centers primarily. But anyway, worships can also take place. So, the divinity is not an object for Laukika Pratyaksha, meaning worldly, direct perception, empirical perception. Philosophy holds divinity as metaphysical principle. The philosophical systems of Astikas formulate so-called theologies, what can be called as theologies. When one goes in search of reality, the divinity does become one such postulate. As a matter of fact, he is the ultimate reality that is intuitively, mystically, it is perceptible through yogic processes. That's why it is called Yogika Pratyaksha. Yogaja Pratyaksha. This happens in supraconscious plane according to a modern saint and yogi, Sri Aurobindo. Mysticism calls it as Gudha Sakshatkarvada. It's an intuitive revelation, which means that yogis do not cite divinity, but they realize divinity. This should be noted. It is not an object that one must be citing, one must be seeing. So these mystic saints, yogis, they have realized divinity and not necessarily that they have cited divinity. We commoners or seekers of truth, religious experience, dharma, yoga, have only one channel to make God an object of knowledge. So we will make God as object of knowledge, and that is what we are doing now. The means for the God to be made as an object, which ultimately is going to become subjective entity. To start with, it will be knowable. We are trying to know the God. Ultimately, the God is known not as a knowable, but as a knower itself. This is that mysticism in it. Now, the means to know God. Now, for us to believe the God and improve our belief, reinforce our belief and Shraddha, we need to know something. What are the means to know? Veda, Upanishads, Agama, Nigama, Itihasa, Purana, saintly literature, Santa Sahitya, that is. So, all this is called Agama Pramana, Nigama Pramana. Agama Nigama. Nigama comes for Vedas and Agama comes for rest. So there you find the postulations about dharma, which is not subject matter of science, and then atma, again not a subject matter for science, and Paramatma or Ishwar, again not object of science. Now another thing we need to consider here in our times, because we have been thinking that science are shastras and shastras are science. So we think all our ancient shastras, we are in habit of calling it as sciences, spiritual sciences, adhyatmic sciences. There is a flaw. It won't be proper to call our Veda Shastras as Vedic sciences, Yoga Shastra as yogic science, Dharma Shastra as science of Dharma, Adhyatma Shastra as Adhyatmic science. So we must overcome this because there is a flaw in this. Today it is not going to create problem, but as we proceed in attaining and maturing our knowledge, we will realize that this has a flaw. Because science means has a scientific process. So all these sciences that we have today, which are postulates of scientists, how do the scientists work? They have experimentations, they experiment, they observe. So we can understand what is scientific method today. But Shastras are not like that. Shastras are highly intuitive. Dharma Shastra, Yoga Shastra, Adhyatma Shastra, Vedanta Shastra, Sankhya Shastra, Veda Shastra. These are all intuitive processes. Not that they were taken to lab and tested and experimented. They were not taken through the scientific process that today we know what is in a subject called logic and scientific processes. In scientific processes, you must have observations, you must have microscopes and telescopes and number of observations, not just one observation, but multiple of observations. Then you will have to carry out certain experiments on it. So that's how the scientific process is. And in the modern world today, we have idea of scientific processes. There are laboratories, but for Shastras, there were no laboratories. Sangita Shastra, Yoga Shastra, Dharma Shastra, Adhyatma Shastra, they were not turned out from a laboratory. So, they were called Shastras. And we are now loosely translating Shastra as a science. That's a major flaw. Let me tell you here, what is really the Shastra? How the word has come? One of the derivations of the Shastra, the word Shastra, there are many derivations that will be available if you are a student of grammar. The dhatu and the dhatu behind Shastra, and then meaning of it. But one of those, Shastra, the word has come from Shastra. Shastra means weapon. So listen to this carefully. Shastra word has come from Shastra. Shastra means weapons. Now, when Bhagavan manifests, Bhagavan always manifests with some Shastra. with some weapons, such as axe, such as bow and arrow, such as mace, etc. etc. So you are aware of Vajra and Dhanushyaban or Gada, mace. And if you look at Devi, with her in her 18 hands or more hands or thousands of hands, Devi is seen wielding weapons. So, whenever Bhagwan manifests with some weapons. Particularly when the mission is Paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam, dharma samsthapanarthaya, sambhavabhi yuge yuge. Bhagavad Gita. So, Bhagwan, in order to destroy the wicked, the vicious ones, we know in our mythology that Bhagwan has taken so many incarnations to vanquish the vicious ones, wicked ones. And he has always used weapons, he has always used shastra or various kinds of shastra. So when Bhagwan comes on this plane to carry out his work as avatar, he takes recourse to shastra more often. While Bhagavatas means devotees of Bhagwan, when they carry out the God's work, when they work as Bhagavad Kainkariya, or they carry out the work as Bhagavad Kainkariya or work as Bhagavad Kinkara, that means in subserviency of divinity, you don't see the Bhagavatas or saints wielding weapons. So, how do they carry out their Bhagavad Karya? They are manifesting to carry out the work of divinity, work of Bhagwan. When Bhagwan does something by appearing in the form of avatar and carry out his work of dharma samsthapana and paritrana of sadhus and vinasha of the wicked ones. So same work Bhagavatas also carry out. But Bhagavatas carry out, devotees carry out not by wielding weapons, not by taking recourse to weapons, not by killing the demonic dispositions of people, of the wicked people, where we have seen Bhagwan Sri Rama killed so many demons, Krishna killed so many demons, Parshurama killed so many Kshatriyas, Indra killed so many Asuras. So they were killed to establish virtue, establish dharma. So that's how the divinity, because it does on a huge scale, that's how it does. The same thing is carried out by rishis, munis, saints, sages, seers. How do they carry out? They don't use any weapon. They use their oratory organ. They use their speech. They take recourse to gospels and they don't take recourse to weapons. But that is their weapon. The Amrutavani in the Gospels is their weapon to transform people, to influence people, to establish dharma, to establish goodness in the world, to establish divine disposition in the world. So they take recourse to their vacha, vak vyapar, oration, their words. So their words do what divinity's weapons do. Because sadhus and santa, they are also for the same purpose. Paritranaya sadhanam and vinashaya dushkrutam. But the vinasha is done differently, not by really killing, but by through their gospels they transform people. So if Bhagwan wields so many weapons, the Bhagavatas only have one weapon. The weaponry is their speech. And therefore, that speech works like a weapon. And therefore, what they speak or their speech is called Shastra. That's how the word Shastra has come. Because what they say becomes Shastra Vakya. What they speak not only becomes Shastra Vakya, but it also is capable of transforming the minds of people. And therefore, we have Veda Shastra, which is Rishi Pranita, Muni Pranita. These are all Shastras given by Rishis and Munis, Yogis. They have given us these Shastras. So why they are called Shastras is because it is their Shastra. It is their weapon to use nectarine words, soft words, but powerful words, which can work for centuries and centuries. The Jnaneshwar's literature is still working even after 700 years. Tukaram's literature still it is working effectively after 350 or more years. Similarly, Dasabodh of Sri Ramadas is still working to transform people and improve people in their dharma, in their conduct. Even after 350, 400 years and 500 years and 700 years and 1000 years. Yoga Shastra is age old, of Patanjali, of Yagnavalkya, of Vyasa, the Puranas of Vyasa. So these are still influencing human mind. Even Bhagavad Gita, although it is Bhagavad Gita, celestial song by very divinity, yet it has come down to us through Mahabharata. We find it in Mahabharata. Now, Bhishma Parva. So these 18 chapters are from Mahabharata, Bhishma Parva. That means it has come through Itihasa to us. And still it is working to transform people, sublimate people, wean people away from wickedity, viciousness, etc. So it is also Shastra. Because Vyasa has given us that form of Bhagavad Gita. So he composed the essence of Bhagavad Gita in Mahabharata, and we have now got it through that Itihasa, which is Agama for us. And that is why, that is the meaning of Shastra. So therefore it is not science. All these postulations were not taken to laboratory to be tested and then experimented upon. But these were intuitive words. And therefore they are called Shastra. So we should not make a blunder of rendering Shastras into English as science. So there we get postulation of the God, definition of the God, description of the God, enumeration of the God. So we need to look into Adhyatma Shastra, Moksha Shastra, Dharma Shastra, Yoga Shastra, Vedanta Shastra, Upanishads, Itihas, Puran, etc. And we will be able to gain knowledge about the God, which will reinforce our faith, belief. It will also properly put shape to our belief. Rather than merely having belief and Shraddha, it will give proper shape. it will give proper productivity to it, and ultimately the subjective entity of Ishvara will be realized at some stage. So that's the knowledge process which the Astikas should adhere to. It should not just believe in God and that's all. We need to do some Shastra Adhyanam. We have to do Shastra Shravanam. Not that everyone will be able to do Shastra Adhyan, but Shastra Shravana. That is by Satsanga. Satsanga will shape our Shraddha for it to become productive. Then it will start operating. Shraddha will operate. And then you will reinforce your belief in God and it will become functional and productive. So this knowledge process should be adhered to by Satsanga, Shravana Sadhana, Sadhana Sangha, various practices by way of yoga, japa, dhyana, upasana, etc., etc., etc. And of course, Shastra Sangha should be a continuous process. Because Shastra will mean differently. When we are little more prepared by our sattva and our sadhana, naturally our comprehension of the Shastra will be better. So this is the process of gaining knowledge. So understand, Ishvara is means and Ishvara itself is end. Ishvara is a knowable, but then it's a knower entity essentially, but it can be made knowable. We need to make it knowable. We must know about the God. Although essentially it is a knower entity. So it is both. Ishvara is knowable and knower for an astika. So that's the knowledge process which one must handle if one is earnestly pursuing the process of Adhyatma. So with that we will end the session. Namaskar all of you.